Thank you, Mr. President. Pleasure to be here again. My concern is that I do travel. I do travel in time and in space, and I'm being presented here again as professor, but also former prime minister. So the problem is that I'm moving from academia to politics and policy making, and then back to academia, and then I moved again to policy making, bringing Poland to the European Union over 20 years ago, and then back to academia. And I wonder how to tackle the issues, including the great problems we are discussing at this panel. I learned to Professor Kahn, great Nobel Prize winner, as the Americans say, there are the science and economics. So economics is supposed not to be the science. The difference between chemistry or physics or mathematics and sociology, political science, economics, is that in mathematics, 2 times 2 makes 4. That is what we do know. But in economics, not necessarily. Take a look. Now we have Trump 2.0 again in the White House. And according to the president of still the most powerful country in the world, 2 times 2 is not 4. It depends how much you wish. And it has the consequences also for artificial intelligence, trade, economic growth, equality, all other problems, aspects we are talking about. So there is the great challenge, and that is what is making difference between academia and politics. Who is right and who is wrong? What is right and what is wrong? All the time we are discussing, it seems to be that is what we are doing, how to act in a reasonable way. Professor Kahn were using the terms sentiment and logic. More often I'm saying emotions and rationality. But let's say for a time being that emotions are pretty close to sentiment and rationality is pretty close to logic. And then we see that we have most of the problems, not because of the weakness of the science, of the research, of the academia. We do know a lot of answers for most challenging questions, including the ones we have in economic matters, which is much more complex than, I would say so, chemistry or physics. Because in economics, all the time we are involved in conflict of 2 I, not only interests. We have different interests. As the old jokes goes, how much is 2 times 2? And Rabbi answers, it depends. Are you selling or buying? So in economics, it depends. In physics or in mathematics, it does not depend. And there is the other I. These are the ideas. We do differ very much with different values, with the ideas we respect, we admire, we attempt to follow. And politics, therefore, is based on very different logic than the science, than the research, than the academia. That was my problem when, after being critical towards the economic policy of certain governments, they said, okay, you know, do it. And I was invited as a technocrat, non-partisan researcher, economist, to manage, to coordinate macroeconomic policy as Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance in four different governments. And one of my early discoveries, one of my very popular saying was, it is not enough to be right. One needs also majority. at least as far as we work in democracy. Because in authoritarian regime, it's enough to be right, presuming that an autocrat is right. What happens from time to time, I'm afraid, less often than more. But in democracy, to be right, to be knowledgeable economist, to know how to tackle the issues of sustainable development, of fair trade, of honest business, of fair rules-based competitiveness, is not enough. Because one needs a majority, and in politics, majority depends completely on different arguments than in science and in research. Because majority means support of public opinion, and public opinion can be manipulated by very sophisticated ways, and most recently, even more, because of so-called artificial intelligence, which quite often is not that much intelligent from the scientific point of view. And for that reason, we'll have more problems in the future than we have had in the past. Therefore, we have to do whatever is possible to bring more of rationality or common sense or logic to replace sentiment and emotions, which are the driving force behind politics too often. Trump 2.0, from this perspective, is quite a big challenge for sustainable development, fair trade, and further integration of the global economy on the behalf of the humankind. My forthcoming book is called Trump 2.0, the power shift and global disruptions. In my native language, we translate common sense as health sense. So the subtitle of the book in Polish language is Trump 2.0, the revolution of sick sense. Because what has been declared by Trump 2.0 is hardly a common sense. From a scientific viewpoint, from theory of economics, it is much more a nonsense. And because of the might of the United States, it has consequences also for Eurasia. And we have to discuss more how to close the gap between economic rationality and lack of rationality in the political activities. There is the solution to this equation, yet it is much more difficult than we claim in social sciences. But definitely it is not as easy as it is pretty often declared by policymakers and the politicians. I wish that not only the economy will be more and more based on knowledge, but also politics more often than not will be based on knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your kind speech, His Excellency Kołodko.